60 days since Vice President Kamala Harris launched her campaign. 47 days to go until Election Day in America. And voters are reacting to the contrast they see between the two candidates. A candidate of change, an unapologetically joyful warrior with a positive message about what she would do for everyday Americans should she win in November. Squaring off against a deeply unpopular, frequently incoherent ex-president who has pledged to, in his own words, quote, be a dictator on day one. A batch of new polls show Vice President Harris in the strongest position of the race so far. A New York Times poll showing her tied nationally with the ex-president, but leading in Pennsylvania. Marist poll showing Vice President Harris ahead in Michigan and Wisconsin. But that's within the margin of error. A Fox News poll shows Vice President Kamala Harris up 2 points nationally over Donald Trump. They are the kinds of numbers that have the Trump campaign. Remember, that's the campaign that told The Atlantic's Tim Alberta about 2 months ago that they were planning to win in a landslide. Now wondering what happened. Here's the ex-president last night.
He got out, and they put her in, and she somehow, a woman, somehow she's doing better than he did.
What do we do with that? She's somehow a woman doing better than he did. He's shocked. Shocked that a woman could possibly be doing better than a man, than President Joe Biden was. That woman is Kamala Harris. And yes, she is drawing huge crowds, raising massive amounts of money, almost triple the amount Donald Trump has raised last month. She is racking up endorsements that range from Taylor Swift to Billie Eilish to former Republican Vice President Dick Cheney. Kamala Harris has run a campaign that has clearly put Team Trump and Trump himself on their back feet. It's why you see all sorts of desperate attacks on Vice President Harris that say much more about Donald Trump and the people around him than anything else. People like Sarah Huckabee Sanders and her nasty swipe at Kamala Harris for not being capable of humility because she has not given birth. Here's what Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff had to say about that and about Donald Trump.
They said that somehow because Cole and Ella aren't Kamala's quote-unquote biological children, that she doesn't have anything in her life to keep her humble. As if keeping women humble, whether you have children or not, is something we should strive for. It is not. But I'll tell you what, going back to that debate, Kamala sure kept Trump humble at that debate, didn't she? Because that's what this is really about. And there is nothing more important to me, Kamala, and Kirsten than our kids, our big, beautiful, blended family. And we know that all parents, no matter how you become one, make the same sacrifices and revel in the same joys of raising children as any parent anywhere.
It's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. MSNBC political analyst, Democratic strategist Cornel Belcher is back with us, plus two of the three co-hosts of MSNBC's powerhouse weekend show, The Weekend, are here. Michael Steele and Alicia Menendez here with me at the table. Michael Steele, I can tell through the magic box that you're fired up and ready to go. So I'm going to start with you. Let me say this. Anyone in a modern family, I call it a modern family, a blended family is the word Doug Emhoff knows, can tell you that the most humbling thing in the world is actually the life of a step parent. I think Glennon Doyle and Abby Womack have this description. They, of course, are the, I believe, award-winning podcasters of We Can Do Hard Things. And what they say is it's all the pain, all the skin in the game, but not the name on the jersey. And I think that's sort of a beautiful way to describe the existence of a step parent. So there's the stupidity and the meanness of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, which isn't really revelatory, but then you layer it over the political stupidity of it, because divorce and remarriage and blended families doesn't know any ideological divide, right? Any one of us would be lucky to find ourselves in that situation. But to smear and alienate every American in a blended family is politically idiotic.
It is, Nicole. You sit there and you scratch your head and you go, is it me or are they just stupid? Is it me or are they just rude, crude, and vile in their approach to how I'm shaping my life, how I'm working to bring a family together? There is no harder work than for a mother or a father who divorce, remarry, try to bring a family together with the idea of being family. And they're now saying that women aren't fulfilled or competent or capable unless they have children, that a family isn't a family unless it is a mom and a dad who marry and never divorce, or whatever they think it is. And you're sitting there going, well, how the hell do you think the country came together? This is bread and butter. This happens every day in America. And we've never found ourselves questioning motherhood or family, the capacity of individuals to create family. We've gone through these discussions as we dealt with, gay marriage and what that family structure looks like. And America's like, okay, we good, right? It's about how you come together, how you raise those children, how you love them, how you care for them. And even if you don't have children, you're still family as a husband and husband, wife, man and woman, whatever your family is. And I don't need these. I'll be good because it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Because he knows I'm watching, Michael.
Mommy's watching.
I don't need these. I'll put it this way. These asses telling me what my family is and telling me how I raise my kids or looking at my family and judging it. You don't get to do that. And as a country, we've never done that, and I don't think we should start now.
Well, and just to sort of meditate for a second, Michael, on the party we were once in, it is the most unconservative thing to want to sit in there with the OBGYN. Really, what we're learning from the reporting in ProPublica out of Georgia is they're in the ER now, and if you're a pregnant woman in a car accident, you need prayer as much as you need medical care in those situations. I mean, we're learning that the Republican policy package is deadly for women. So all the places they want to be is the most unconservative thing. They want to be in the ER with pregnant women. They want to be in the emergency room for the ultrasound. They want to be there if you are in a blended family, and they're going to look and see whether you're as humble as someone who's given birth. They are everywhere, and it is the most unconservative thing I've ever seen.
It is the most unconservative thing, and even more than what you've just described is they want to see you damn near death before they offer help. And that's the most cynical and sinister part of this, that as we've seen in discussions by women who are telling their stories, and as the vice president so well laid out in her debate with Donald Trump, that women, families, men don't want to see themselves in a situation where the one they care for is bleeding out in a parking lot because the emergency room won't take them in. That's the America they're creating for us. And the challenge they now have, and it's coming home to nip a little bit. We see it in various areas around the country, in the battleground states, but across the country, where this storyline is not something Americans want. And it is defining how they're looking at this campaign. And at the end of the day, whether you are a pro-life woman or a pro-choice woman, no matter where your stripe is, you're looking at what the country looks like for your daughter and your granddaughter. and you don't like what you're seeing right now. And that's, I think, where Republicans and why you're seeing so many of them backstroke, why right now they're stumbling over the IVF legislation, trying to hold the hard line while at the same time recognizing they're losing political ground with the American people.
You guys are such co-anchors. I can hear you like you're sitting next to each other.
Like a backup singer, I know.
I mean, it's showing up in the polls, but I think if you are part of the pro-democracy coalition who doesn't think being pregnant should be a fatal condition in America, you'd like to see her pull away more.
Right. Well, and you also understand the hypocrisy of what they're saying, which is at a time when they are limiting access to IVF, limiting access to the type of reproductive care that is now jeopardizing women's future fertility. What kind of ways are they leaving for American women to have a family
to be humble
the right way? But it's clear what they're doing here, which is they can't delegitimize Kamala Harris as a candidate. So they're going to try to delegitimize her as a woman. It has sort of a whiff of Donald Trump's racist birther lie that he tried to weaponize against Barack Obama. And I think part of what they're getting wrong is they think that they can drive a wedge between women who have biological children and women who do not, when in reality, one of the few common experiences of being a woman in this country is to have every choice you make deemed wrong. You don't want to have kids, you're wrong. You want to have kids and then you want to go to work, you're wrong. You want to have kids and then you take a break from your career in order to be home with your kids, you're wrong. So they have managed to tap in to one of the central commonalities of women voters in reminding us that Kamala Harris is all of us because what she has chosen is somehow illegitimate and wrong. And to go to something you and I have talked about a lot is it's not enough for it to be a conversation about and among women. It has to be a conversation that includes men. And so the fact that you have her husband out there on the stump being the one who's actually addressing this reminds American men that this isn't just about the women in your lives. This is also about you and your family being under attack.
Well, and
So, Secretary Clinton, you also write about the state of our politics quite a bit in the book and your reaction to some of the things you've seen over the last few years. Thinking about this campaign right now, we actually had a clip from you as you were recording your audio book that we played last week when this change came at the top of the Democratic ticket and your reaction to it. There was lots of consternation ahead of time about whether Joe Biden should stay or go. And when he made the announcement, you and President Clinton sort of stepped very quickly into the gap and said, we endorse Kamala Harris. This is a good thing for the party. So tell me about your thinking before and after. Did you think before that the president made that decision to step aside that that was the right thing to do?
Well, I, like many people, wanted the president to make the decision that was right for him and right for the country, which he did. And I've said before, it was a really selfless act of patriotism. I can't imagine the candidate on the other side giving up power under any circumstance. And President Biden did. And he immediately endorsed his vice president. And then Bill and I absolutely moved quickly to endorse Kamala as well. And we did it for a couple of reasons. One, I've known her for a number of years. I am a fan of hers. I think she has handled herself extremely well during the vice presidency, starting in COVID, under really difficult circumstances. And it's a tough job being vice president under any presidency, no matter what's happening in the country. And I had a lot of confidence in her sort of political touch and feel. I also thought it was better for the party and the country that we get behind President Biden's endorsement of her. People who talked about, let's have a contested convention, let's have some sort of contest in, 6 weeks, I think underestimated what chaos would have done to that presidential campaign and to the prospects for the Democrats. But in any event, she rose to the occasion. She's run a flawless campaign ever since she got into it. We talked to her literally right after the president decided to step aside. And I have been incredibly impressed and delighted to see the country meeting her, to see how people are responding to her, and to see the joy. When I was talking to Joe and Mika and just a minute ago, I mean, look, life is hard. Politics is really brutal. It's a contact sport. And to think that the other side in this campaign wants people to be afraid and filled with anger and hatred and trying to hurt other people is so terrible and so un-American. And now we have with, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, two happy warriors, two people who will fight for us, who will work for us, and don't want us to hate each other. They want us actually to find some common ground.
So what is your assessment of the stakes of this election? I mean, you are in a very exclusive club of people who've ever run for president, let alone run against Donald Trump. So to what extent do you offer counsel or do you speak with Kamala Harris about how to run against Donald Trump, who, as you've said, is a different candidate now, a darker candidate, arguably, than he was in 2016? That's
absolutely true, Willie. I've talked with Kamala a few times. I obviously talked with her before the debate because he is more incoherent. He is angrier. He is lashing out all the time at everybody. He's filled with grievance and rage. And, in my acceptance speech at the convention way back in 2016, I said, you can't trust somebody with nuclear weapons who you can bait with a tweet, because I saw that in him at the time. A lot of people didn't, or they gave him the benefit of the doubt, or they thought, hey, we've had 2 terms of a Democrat, let's try the Republicans, for whatever reason. I understand that. But now the stakes are even higher because he has a record. We have seen him try to abuse power. We have seen him try to overturn a legitimate, free, fair election. We have watched him bungle COVID and cause unnecessary deaths and pain. So he has a record. And in addition to that, he's told us what he's going to do. He is absolutely linked to this Project 2025 and all of their dark and dystopian efforts to turn the clock back on Americans' rights and the way we live and how we, look at our futures together. And he has a long rhetorical record now of making it very clear that he would be unaccountable if he were ever near the White House again.
Madam Secretary, as you just said, there's so much at stake and there's proof as to what is at stake. So those who believe in our democracy would consider this an all-hands-on-deck moment.
Right.
Military officials on both sides of the aisle, former members of Trump's administration, many Republicans have stepped up, signed letters, and even said they're going to vote for Kamala Harris. Who in the Republican Party, high up, who you think could move the meter, do you think should step up and make that same declaration?
Well, Mika, I wish everybody would. Everybody who knows the danger that he poses. And frankly, having served in the Senate for 8 years, and I've heard Joe say this on the show many times, we know that the Republicans we served with, we know the Republicans who are still there, many of them know better. And what is holding them back and making them have this allegiance to Trump, I don't, fully understand. And in the book, I write about what it would be like to having fallen asleep now and not know who won, and waking up after the election and after the inauguration and to see what Trump is doing, which is implementing his policy with military troops in the street to, grab the woman who waits on you at the diner, pick up the guy who's, mowing the grass in the neighbor's yard, not because you have any information about them, but because of the way they look or maybe their first language. That is unimaginable, but that is what is being promised. So I would ask every Republican. A lot of people decided not to run from the Congress when they knew that they could not support Trump, and they knew that if they didn't, they'd be primaried. Let them step up. But what's most important to me are the people who have served with him. They are sounding a 3-alarm fire is possible. They are telling us they were in the Defense Department, the White House, Homeland Security, across his government. They're begging us, please, I saw him, don't put him in power again.
Yeah, and the hope is to have a real Republican Party again. I mean, if that could be rebuilt in some way, that would be good for our democracy. And as a Democrat, I think we agree on that, which is why I wonder, members of the Bush family, Condoleezza Rice, who could move the meter and perhaps give other Republicans serving right now the permission structure to break out of this hold?
I wish they all would. You know, I've written before about sitting next to President George W. Bush at, Trump's inauguration. And instead of hearing what you expect to hear, which is, I want to be the president for everybody, it was a hard campaign, now let's pull together as Americans, the kind of things that I would have said and other people say. We heard about carnage in the streets, and we saw this dark, dystopian image of our country, which is unrecognizable. And at the end of it, President Bush turned to me and said, that was some weird shit. And so, honestly, he knew it then. We have seen all of this unfold. I'm not going to speak for him. He has to make his own decisions about public statements. But everybody who cares about this country, which I know they do, I worked with them. I was the senator from New York on 9/11. I was in the Oval Office 2 days later. I told the president what we needed to rebuild New York, $20 billion. He looked at me. He said, you've got it. And he never wavered. They love this country. They know this man who is running at the head of their party is a wrecking ball for everything we believe in. So everyone should, this is a full, hands on deck moment. And you never know what might influence somebody in their voting. I personally think Taylor Swift is, getting people to go out and register and hopefully turn out to vote. But I do know from, working on this book and writing about the stakes, our country would be unrecognizable if this man got his hands on power again. And, I love what some of the Republicans are saying who are endorsing Kamala. They're saying, look, I don't agree with her on anything. Liz Cheney is a perfect example. Dick Cheney, for heaven's sakes. I don't agree with her. But what we do agree on is we have to save our democracy first and foremost. Then we can start arguing again. We can have all the policy disputes about everything under the sun that you can imagine. But let's not let this man have power again.
Tonight we cover this. What started in Chicago isn't staying there. The most prominent surprise addition to Harris's DNC was Oprah, you might recall. She hadn't previously endorsed Biden's 2024 campaign. She wasn't even listed for the convention. It was that surprise that night. She showed up, she brought down the House, and today we can report the Harris campaign is deploying Oprah in the key state of Michigan.
We're just hours away from 8 p.m. Eastern time, where we're in Michigan and we have 1,000 screens everywhere you see those little heads there, and 400 people in the audience for what we are hoping is going to be one great big giant voter rally, getting people fired up to vote on November 5th with Kamala Harris.
That is Oprah doing what she does so well. And she also, as you might have seen on the screen, is doing this pursuant to something that my colleague Nicole Wallace just mentioned, that a lot goes on YouTube nowadays. Oprah's Detroit event will rally voters literally there in Michigan, but also across the nation, because the TV star is broadcasting the event live to her streaming and YouTube audience. And you can imagine Oprah has a lot of people interested. She'll be flanked by the state's Democratic governor, Whitmer. And while campaigns tap politicians as surrogates, they go to the floor of Congress and ask people to help, the Harris campaign clearly sees Oprah as larger than any member of Congress, a famous and respected validator who's literally one of Harris's most influential surrogates, as the Times put it. Oprah does not campaign on every big national political debate. She doesn't get involved in most local races. And even in presidential politics, she is selective. That is why her DNC appearance wasn't taken for granted as something that would automatically happen no matter who the candidate was. And Democrats saw her as a key part of building momentum when she first backed Obama over Clinton in the Democratic primaries.
He gave political theater a whole new meaning. Call it what you want. Oprah-Obama, the Double O, Oprah-Palooza. The queen of daytime talk seemed to have found a new royal calling.
I'm beginning to like this. I'm beginning to like this.
And so was Barack Obama.
You know you've got a good program when I'm the third best speaker.
It is the same question that our nation is asking. Are you the one? Are you the one? I'm here to tell you, Iowa, he is the one. He is the one. Barack Obama.
Oprah Winfrey is stumping for Barack Obama. It is the first time Winfrey has ever endorsed a presidential candidate.
Let me tell you how much Michelle and I love Oprah Winfrey. You realize her character and her soul is, this is a wonderful person. You want Oprah as vice president? In more than 4,500 episodes of her show, her message was always, you can.
One of the biggest surprises of the night was Oprah as in Winfrey.
Oprah endorsed Kamala Harris. She spoke at the Democratic National Convention.
Values and character matter most of all. Decency and respect are on the ballot in 2024. Common sense tells you that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz can give us decency and respect. Let us choose common sense over nonsense. Let's all choose Kamala Harris.
A lot of energy there. Notice the themes: values, decency, common sense. Those aren't ideological appeals, certainly not partisan. And Oprah's audience famously spans geography, demographics, and certainly today's polarized style of politics. Her hit show was watched by stay-at-home parents and working parents and single people. She built a following. She used her platform also to push people to open up their minds, and she was open to reform. They even called it the Oprah effect, how her 40 million plus weekly viewers would respond directly to her ideas or things she encouraged people to do. The show estimates, we checked, that they received over 20 million pieces of U.S. mail, physical mail, the way people used to write it, from fans over the show's run. And few TV shows try to advance reading. You're watching a TV show right now. We love reading around here, but we'll often tell you what to watch or tune in or keep it locked here for what's on later. But she used that show for reading. Her book club, now famous, launched bestsellers and community reading around the country. And that illustrates how her audience could act on her recommendations, which means an endorsement from that kind of person with that kind of active audience following still really matters in politics. Tonight's Oprah programming that I mentioned, they're going to broadcast the thing with Harris, could resonate with voters who spent their formative years watching Oprah from her rise in 1980s local TV in Chicago to the force she remains today.
You mean me?
She is also the host of a very successful television program in Chicago and is the first guest we've ever had on this program named Oprah. Please welcome Oprah Winfrey.
I know now that I am where I am because I always believed I could get here. Always believed it.
She may have believed it, but how did she get there? When she was 22, she moved to Baltimore and became an anchor woman on a local TV news show.
We've never seen you behave this way before.
I know.
Have you ever felt this way before?
Julia Roberts told me that nobody does turkeys like Green Hour some more turkey!
What's your religion, Liz Lemon?
I pretty much just do whatever Oprah tells me to.
Got that job himself. The White House called him. He didn't call the White House.
Everything you are and everything you have is because of that butler.
All my life I had to fight. I had to fight my daddy. I had to fight my uncles. I had to fight my brothers.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not.
Gee, Oprah, I really like that diamond bracelet.
Nice try. Speaking your truth is the most powerful tool we all have.
And that's just a slice of a kernel of what she's been doing and saying over these years. She is in our culture. That truth that she talks about matters. And while Oprah was not partisan, she also did not hide behind a kind of televised or corporate neutrality. As she built her reach and influence, she then used her powerful tools, what she's really good at, listening, connecting, emoting with people, to humanize and uplift people who are sometimes marginalized by American society. I mention that tonight because it is very relevant to what's happening today, tonight, tomorrow in America as we think about these debates and this dehumanization and this big choice between two very different candidates. Oprah explored hard topics, which daytime and corporate media often ducked in that era. An era before cable TV and more political discussion, and certainly before the internet, at least opened up more lanes and possibilities for certain conversations. I say that by way of introduction because keep in mind what you're about to see at the time was viewed as even more radical than today.
See, I believe God created Ellen. I believe God did that. Right. And if gay, Ellen says she's gay, I believe God created her gay. I believe God did that.
Can we get this straight? What do you call yourself? Do you call yourself African American? I know you are. Your father's half black, quarter Chinese, quarter American Indian. Mother's half Thai, quarter Chinese, and quarter white. So you are. That's why you are America's son.
Yeah.
You are America's son. Can you take us to the day that Jim came to you and said, I want to be a woman?
Have you both always been staunch Republicans?
I thought so.
And so all of a sudden this year, what was it about Mr. Bush that changed your mind?
Oprah is not new to this. She's summoning all of that for this candidacy, which might also require some new thinking for some people around the country and amplifying the message that Harris has been hitting this week.
So is that message working? Well, let's take a look at these new Quinnipiac polls, Charlie. Harris narrowly ahead in 3 crucial states, trimming Trump's lead on a couple of big issues in this election. On the economy, which he's been up by double digits in some polls ahead of this. In Michigan there and in Pennsylvania, he's up only 2 points on immigration. Say for Wisconsin, she's within the margin of error on that issue. What do you think that says about which message is resonating in states like yours?
Well, I think what's happened with Donald Trump is people are getting a little bit tired of him right now. And I think he hurt himself on the border deal. When he blew up the border deal, he muddled the message on immigration. He gave Harris a great opportunity to say, I'm for more Border Patrol agents. I'm for fixing the asylum system. He opposed it. And so she's been able to reclaim a little bit of lost ground on that. So that's helpful. But in Pennsylvania, look, I think she's going to really overperform in the Philadelphia media market. And she's going to have to, and she needs to. And I think women's health, abortion rights will be a very big issue there. Post-Dobbs, we haven't seen an election for President post-Dobbs. And even though Trump historically has performed better than the battleground state polls have suggested, we don't know how it'll play out this time, but it seems like she has a slight advantage.
I mean, he's talking a lot about the immigration issue through these conspiracy theories, Jonathan, related to Haitian migrants in Ohio. Do you think that's actually hurting him?
I think eventually it will for a few reasons. One, the Wall Street Journal today front page story about how this myth and this lie was known to him. His people told him, and yet he's still doing it. The second thing is, the stubbornness and the cruelty, I think, it's sort of a slow burn. When you have the Republican governor of the state, the Republican mayor of this city pleading with the nominee of their party to stop spreading this lie, and he refuses, and there are bomb threats and schools can't open because of this, I think people will take a step back to Charlie's point and think, I'm tired. I'm tired of this. I don't know if I want to go through this. Now, the real issue is immigration, but we're not having the real conversation that needs to be had because of this.
Right. It's almost a distraction from the real issue. And perhaps he doesn't want to talk about the issue because the numbers aren't reinforcing his message about the problem at the border with those border crossings going down. April, there's also some new polling on black voters, specifically in swing states. And when you look at this, Harris, you can, as you would expect, see she leads 82-12, so an overwhelming lead there. But that's still a touch behind where Biden was in 2020 when you look at the exit poll results there. What do you make of this poll? What does it tell you?
Well, this poll tells me it's a straw holes look view at this moment. Right now, people know who Donald Trump is. A lot of black people understand who Kamala Harris is and understand her culture. But at the time, black Americans are still struggling and trying to process. They want things for them. This situation, as Jonathan just said about Haiti, Haitians are black people in this country. It does not bode well. And when you have the Republican governor saying, I don't want you to come, Donald Trump, because you will expend our resources beyond what we have, that's saying a signal too. And let's see if that translates for her. But in this moment, you have people who are still not sure if they want to even vote. And those are the people that she has to get, those people who are apathetic and those people who are still on the fence, because it's about moving forward in this time of hate that Donald Trump keeps perpetrating and talking about, especially in that debate where it wasn't a whisper like, oh, we heard he said shithole nations or people live in shithole houses. We heard Donald Trump say that himself. And as you said, the hate that he continues to spread. And until he comes out and apologizes to black people and to Haitians for that, his numbers are going to go down in the black community.
What are your expectations of this Oprah rally today? I mean, are these celebrity endorsements, Oprah, Taylor Swift, helping to juice enthusiasm and turnout?
The Swifties are powerful, and Oprah is powerful herself. She is one of the most successful people in this nation. You heard me say successful people, beyond race, beyond gender. And she brings with her a bandwidth and a power that no other has. Look at what she did with Barack Obama. She helped elevate Barack Obama. He was on his own a great candidate, but she elevated that platform, and now she is behind Kamala Harris. I mean, look at what just happens when she says, I am endorsing this book. My God, the book soars out of beyond the #1 status in the New York Times bestsellers list. But for her to lend her voice, it shows that I have vetted her singularly. I think she will be a good candidate. She could have done this for other people, but she hadn't. But she's doing this for Kamala Harris, and it makes a big deal, especially going on Win with Black Women and Win with Black Men, the first groups that really expose this viral moment of, funding and just the excitement.
Yeah, it's been a light switch in terms of the election engagement that we're seeing from all kinds of voters and different groups. This morning, Hillary Clinton was on MSNBC and recounted sitting next to former President Bush at Trump's inaugural address. Watch.
We heard about carnage in the streets, and we saw this dark, dystopian image of our country, which is unrecognizable. And at the end of it, President Bush turned to me and said, that was some weird. And so, honestly, he knew it then. We have seen all of this unfold.
So she is saying that Trump is even darker and angrier now than then. How do you think his tone and messaging themes are resonating with voters who aren't part of his core group of supporters?
It's almost inexplicable what he's doing. He is supposed to try to broaden his base. He never does that. He just doubles down on the MAGA agenda.
It's all about, for him, trying to get enthusiasm, right? And getting those people to turn out.
But he's got such a low ceiling. It just never it has never made any sense to me that he has not expanded his base. He should be doing that. He should be reaching out. But when you're talking about eating cats and dogs in Ohio and then other just bizarre things that he has been doing, his temperament, I am not shocked that he seems to be declining a little bit in these polls. I mean, it's exhausting, and it's offending people. I can't explain the inexplicable, but as a politician. By the way, I was at that inauguration when George Bush said that, and all I can say is that, I walked out and I said, I'm not going to be critical of him today because it's inauguration day. The only thing I can say is this guy just restated all the things he said in his campaign. It was a terrible speech, but he just continues to go down these deep, dark rabbit holes of nativism, xenophobia, protectionism, isolationism, and he just can't get out of his own way.
So J.D. Vance and Trump have been pointing fingers at Democrats for these attempts on his life, Jonathan. So when we talk about the rhetoric, there's been so many calls from Democrats specifically to try to tone it down, to take a beat. But they are also saying, what about you, right? On terms of both sides need to tone it down. This headline from New York Magazine is pushing back on this logic, saying, quote, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, and saying so is not incitement. What strikes me, Jonathan, is many of the rhetorical attacks that we're seeing from Harris and Walz and the Harris campaign are using Trump's own words. They're just highlighting things that he has said, his own quotes. The bulk post from the Kamala HQ account is Trump in his own words. Do you see Democrats shifting their message? Should they?
No. What Trump is doing by trying to shift the blame onto Democrats is projection. That is all that Trump is. Anything he accuses someone of, just do a little search, and you will see that he is guilty of it himself. And he's trying to deflect, and he's trying to project. Using his own quotes against him or to highlight them. I mean, the New York Magazine is right. Democrats are pointing this out for a reason. When he stands there and says, I like to punch that guy in the face, and if something happens to you, I will pay your legal bills. What is that? From that small thing to inciting an insurrection in the building, outside that window there. He is the one who has been inciting violence. And for Democrats to point that out is not inciting violence themselves. It's warning people. It's warning the American people. And Democrats have to keep doing it.